to our second installment of our NFLRC OLP webinar series, Engaging with Students Through SEL. And tonight I have two fantastic presentations I am really excited to introduce. And we're starting first with my colleague at NC Virtual, Shara Packman. Shara is a Latin language teacher at North Carolina Virtual Public Schools and also at Reed Ross Classical School in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And since 2017, she's served as an instructional leader for world languages at NC Virtual. She has provided professional development for online student engagement and has been a longtime proponent of applying SEL concepts to online classes. Currently, she is the proud sponsor for the first ever Gay Straight Alliance at Reed Ross and is an advocate for acceptance for all LGBTQ+ students and promoting inclusion school-wide. And before we get started, I just do want to remind everyone that if you are here to earn our badge, please be sure that on Zoom, your name that you will want to have to get credit for attending tonight is the name that displays for you. So without any further ado, I am very pleased to introduce my colleague and mentor, Shara Packman. Shara, welcome aboard.
Thank you so much, Sarah. Welcome, everyone. I'm so pleased to be here tonight. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now so that you can hopefully see my presentation. And it'll be up in just a second. Okay, so I am going to talk about engagement through SEL in the virtual classroom. We've all heard it in our face-to-face classrooms, but what does this look like when you can't physically see your students? So here's my overview, and these titles don't mean anything to you yet, but hopefully they will by the time I'm finished. I have the football player, Guatemala, the Arctic monkeys, and the barista. And I'm going to use these anecdotes about students I've taught virtually to tell you a little bit about what I do in the classroom. So I want to start with the football player, or why you never give up on a student. This was several years ago. I was teaching a summer session, and I think you all know how hard teaching summer session virtually can be, because the kids sign up and they're all excited about getting ahead, but then they forget about all the fun things they want to do in the summer instead. And I had this young man, and he just wasn't doing any work. And I was doing all the normal things, you know, talking to his mother, talking to his school, talking to him. And it was just day after day of me calling him and talking to him on the phone and saying, honey, you know, you need to do your work, right? Yes, ma'am. And I said, you know, I'll help you, right? Yes, ma'am. And I'd say, okay, so maybe try to do some stuff today. Yes, ma'am. And then he wouldn't do anything. I talked to his mother, texted with her at least 2 or 3 times a week, probably had a phone call with her. And this child was a young man who was looking at a lucrative football scholarship at several colleges, good football schools all across the country. But he had to pass the class to graduate. And as the summer wound down, you know, it's only an 8-week session. Now it's 6 weeks. It used to be 8. He just still hadn't done anything. And I know his mother was on him, and I was calling him every day and just trying to just get him to do something. And finally, I don't know what did it. He pulled it out in the end. And he just did just enough to pass. And he got a huge football scholarship to like Clemson or something and was very successful. But this is what his mother said to me. She said, thank you, Miss Packman, for never giving up on my boy. And I didn't yell at him. I didn't give up on him. And then the best thing that came out of this, which was just beautiful, was that later on that fall, after I was done teaching him, sorry about that, his mother called me and she said, I want you to come to his senior night football game. So I drove up to Cary, North Carolina, which is about an hour and a half from where I live, maybe an hour and 40 minutes. And I sat with his mom and his uncles and his cousins, and I watched him make 2 touchdowns. And then after the game, I got to meet him. And he was just the most handsome, sweetest boy. And it meant so much to me that he wanted me at that football game, that his mother wanted me at that football game. And it's because I never gave up on him and I pushed him just enough to pass. And so when you have a kid who's maybe not working, don't give up on that kid. Keep making the contacts, keep talking, because you never know what they're going to pull out in the end. So that's the football player. Let me see here. So this is persistence, but kindness. Reach out regularly, not too regularly. I have to teach myself that one because I'm very impatient. Make the expectations clear. Say please and thank you. You know, when you ask a kid to do their work, say, you know, would you please go back and look at chapter 3 again? Thank you for going in and doing your work. Make it clear that you're willing to help. Every conversation I have with a child who's behind is, hey, what can I do to help you? Not, you're missing 3,000 assignments, but how can I help you? How can I make this better for you? And make sure you're involving those stakeholders. And what I always say to parents is, all I want is for your kid to do their best. All I want is for your kid to have the best grade that he or she can get. So, you know, this is what needs to happen. And say please and thank you to parents as well. Guatemala. This was the first student I had that I think I really cried over. This little girl was Guatemalan. I'm pretty sure she and her family was non-documented. She was sweet as can be, but was always behind on her work. And by calling her often or texting her, I got her comfortable enough with me that she told me what was going on. Her father was dying. And they couldn't afford to put him in any hospitals here. So they had to send him back to Guatemala, where he had to go without his family. And they couldn't go visit him while he was dying because they were undocumented and there was no, they might not have been able to come back. So her father went to Guatemala and he spent the semester that I was teaching her dying away from his family. And I just felt so much for this girl, and I contacted her school. I'm like, how can I help her? How can I help her? Because she did do her work and her work was good, but she was just struggling emotionally. And her school was like, well, we don't know anything about this. So she was telling me things that her family wasn't even telling her school. And I mentioned this to a friend of mine who actually works for the State Department, ironically. And she said, I want to help. And she sent me like a $500 Walmart gift card. And she told some other friends. And all of a sudden I had all these gift cards. And I think it wound up being like close to $1,500 that my friends donated, that I sent to this girl and her family to help them. And only because I opened my heart to her did she tell me these things. And because I was appropriate with her when she was expressing, you know, how upset she was that her father was dying and she couldn't be with him. And, you know, you got to let these kids in to what's inside you, and let them know that you have feelings as well, and that you empathize with their feelings. We're teaching them to empathize by empathizing with them. You know, one of the things we do at NC Virtual is we could keep a contact log. And I'm guilty of it, and I know some of my teachers are guilty of it. You just check a box. Yeah, I texted with this kid today. But I don't want my communications with these kids to be just because I'm communicating with them. I want to get something out of that, and I want to give them something out of it. So don't communicate just to communicate. You know, build a relationship. Teens want to be seen. They want people to know who they are and what's important to them and what they're all about. And sometimes we don't pay attention to that. I do it sometimes. You know, you're in a hurry, you're really busy, and here's a kid telling you about his weekend, and you're just like, oh, that's great, but you don't get into it. Sometimes you might be the only person in that child's life who says, I'll help you, who says, what do you need? If you find out about situations with students like this girl whose dad was dying in Guatemala, you need to reach out to the school and see what they're doing to support these kids, because sometimes, like, her school didn't even know. So that's, just listen to them, but more than listen, take it in and give it back. All right, let's talk about teen talk for a second, a little bit lighter than the Guatemala story. Are you hip? Are you cool? Do your kids think you're cool? My kids think I'm lame, but you don't have to be cool. Because if you ask them the right questions, they're going to tell you everything you want to know. Let's talk about the Arctic monkeys. So one of the things that I do in my virtual classes especially is I do an announcement on Tuesdays, and I do one on Fridays called Text Me Tuesday and Fun Friday. And on Text Me Tuesdays, I ask the kids to tell me something about them. And I try to relate the questions to their interests. Some teachers do questions for the kids to text answers to with, that has to do with class content, but they're doing Latin all the time. I want to know who these kids are. And they're so much more than just my Latin students. So the Arctic Monkeys, if you didn't know, is a band. And my Text Me Tuesday this week was, hey, what's your favorite band and what song should I listen to? And one of my girls sent me that she liked the Arctic Monkeys. I was familiar with the Arctic Monkeys, but she told me I should listen to a song called Crying Lightning. And I did, and I loved it. And I thought, if she likes the Arctic Monkeys, she'll really like the Strokes. So I texted her and told her to listen to the Strokes song last night. And then she texted me back and said, oh my gosh, I loved it. What else should I listen to? And we texted all day long on and off about music. This girl doesn't know me. I don't know her. I don't even know what she looks like. But man, I got her talking and into music, and we made this great connection. Here's the thing. These kids never see me live. Even in my live classes, I only put the camera on for a minute and I turn them off. I don't see them live. How do you become a person to these kids? How do you become a real person? Not just somebody who grades their work and maybe tells them what to do. Every time I ask them a question, I give my answer too. I don't think it's fair for me to ask them for information without me giving them information. I tell them about my life, appropriately, of course, but like my boyfriend's a professional musician. So sometimes on a Friday night, these kids are texting me and I'm sitting in a bar listening to a band. They know he's a musician. They know I have a dog. Get them talking about things that interest them. And I have a whole list for you here in a moment. Pictures are worth 1,000 words. One thing I love to do is when it's prom season, I'll ask the kids, hey, if you're going to prom, send me a picture of you in your prom attire. And they send me pictures of them in their dresses and tuxes, and it's so neat. The other thing I do is for holidays. I love Christmas. I love Christmas trees and I love ornaments. So I'm always like, hey, if you text me a picture of your ornament or your favorite ornament or your tree, I'll send you mine. So you're getting this exchange. It's not just one-way information. The other one I always do is, hey, text me a picture of your pet and I'll text you a picture of mine. So they text me pictures of iguanas and bearded dragons and dogs and cats and horses, and they get a picture of my dog, Judy. And then I become real to them. I become a person. And when you become a person to your students, you get so much more out of them. Here are great teen topics. You want to ask things that everyone has an opinion about. You want to ask something they care about. Food is my go-to. I'm sure you can tell. Food is my go-to. You can ask 1,000 things about food. What's your favorite candy? What's your favorite restaurant? Do you cook? What do you like to cook? What do you wish you could cook? What's the best thing you've ever cooked? What's your favorite meal that someone's cooked for you? What could you eat every day and not get tired of? What do you not like to eat? Everyone has an opinion about food. I just gave you a music example. One of the things I do in my copious free time and when I have money is I like to go to concerts. So I'll post in my announcements, hey, I went to a concert this weekend. Have you guys been to any concerts? TV shows, what do you watch? I watch everything. So usually when the kids text me back, I'm like, oh, I watched that too. Movies, what movies have you seen? What's your favorite movie? What movie could you watch over and over again and never get tired of? Inspiration, this is a good one. What inspires you? Ask the kids that, and then I tell them what inspires me. Who's your favorite person? You know, that's a good one. What are your goals? What do you want to be when you grow up? What's your interest? Ask them about their pets. Holidays, events, you know, do you like Valentine's Day? Do you hate Valentine's Day? Do you dress up for Halloween? If you do, what do you dress up as? Send me a picture of your costume. You know, all these things are so easy to do. Now, will you get every kid? No, some kids don't want to talk to you. They don't want to talk to me either. But what I've been doing lately is in my announcements, I'm like, you know, if you don't want to answer my question, just text me and say I'm alive. So I get 3 or 4, hey, I'm alive texts every week. And that's good because I reply, I'm so glad to hear that. What happened to you today that was good? What can I do to help you? The barista, let's talk about this boy. This is vulnerable populations. Little things make such a difference. So I had a young man last semester who was a barista at Starbucks, and he was very troubled, and he was gay. He'd been kicked out of his house. He was emancipated from his parents and living with his boyfriend. And he was kicked out of his house because he was gay. And he was in therapy and suicidal all semester that I taught him. He was not doing much work. He did pass my class. I would just text him every couple days and be like, how are you feeling? I didn't even care about his work. I just wanted him to be alive. And he would text me back, thank you so much for asking. I'm so happy that you care about me, which broke my heart. Vulnerable populations, poor kids, LGBT kids, undocumented kids, ESL learners. There are lots of vulnerable populations, and if you really get to know your students, you can help those students. Let's see, switching slides here. How do you show compassion in little ways? Pronouns is a great one. I have a student this semester on the roster. This student's name was Jennifer. But when I texted with them, they used the name Jay, J-A-Y. And my first question was, what are your pronouns? And they said, thank you so much for asking. My pronouns are they, them. And I said, well, my pronouns are she, her. And this makes such a difference to ask kids what their pronouns are, because so many kids in this generation are so comfortable with being non-binary or transgendered. And our generation, we're not used to that, but we've got to learn, because why would I want to work hard in a class where the teacher doesn't even care who I am or what my identity is? My Bitmoji. I put an example of my Bitmoji here. If you don't have one, you should really get one. I didn't even do this on purpose. I've had the same Bitmoji for a long time in the same outfit, but you can see that my Bitmoji is wearing a rainbow heart. And I have had kids notice that and immediately know that I'm an ally. I just picked it because I thought it was a cute t-shirt. I am an ally, but I have had a lot of gay kids and non-binary kids and trans kids be really comfortable with me because my Bitmoji shows them that I'm going to accept them for who they are. And again, that was unintentional. It's just something that happened. I'll never change it now. Sensitivity with stakeholders. This is tough. When you get a non-binary kid or trans kid who says, you know, my name is Cameron, but the name on the registration is Caitlin. How do you do that with parents? So what I do is I just ask the student, is your grown-up comfortable with calling you Cameron? And if they say no, then when I talk to the parent, I use the dead name. I don't like doing it, but it makes things smoother with parents. So please be sensitive about if you're accepting of a child's identity, but maybe the parent isn't, you don't want to endanger that kid at home. And that's a really tricky area to navigate.
Shara,
But
we're
if
at,
anyone, you know,
we're 21 past
10
the hour.
minutes. Okay, thank you.
Yep.
So shout outs. One great way to talk to kids is by giving them shout outs in your announcements or in your emails, however you communicate, like if it's a group email, to shout out kids. I have a graphic. This is a link. I don't know if we can click it. Nope. But I put it in a Google Doc. I'm done sharing. Go away. And I have it here for you. And I will drop the link in the chat after my presentation. But this is a pep talk generator. I'm having trouble scrolling up. But it basically gives kids a way to do, it gives you a way to do compliments for kids. It says, you can pick any of these. Know this, the essential you just shimmers for reals. Are these silly? They're totally silly. But the kids think they're hilarious when I use them, when I write them on papers in my face-to-face class, or I stick them in a text to a kid. They just think they are so funny. And it's a way to compliment kids in a fun, silly way that they'll remember. You can also do shout outs. I have a student, we've only been in virtual class for 3 weeks. I have a student that just finished the class. In 3 weeks, she finished the whole class and got an A on everything she did. So in this week's announcements, I gave her a shout out. But you can shout out anything you want. Hey, good job to so-and-so, so-and-so, and so-and-so for working over the weekend. That works. At any rate, all of this just builds relationships. And that's what you've got to do, especially these days, especially with this generation of kids. They need a relationship with you before they're going to engage with anything academic that you are teaching them. Just build the relationship. And all of these things that I've mentioned tonight don't take much time at all. They're not internet tools that you have to sign up for. They're just things that come from your heart that you give these kids to make them feel special and important and want to do your work, which I think is the goal of all teachers. Thank you so much for listening to me tonight. I hope you got something out of it. That's my email right there at the bottom of the screen. Any of you can email me anytime if you have questions, you want tips. I'd be happy to talk to any of you. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop my share and I'm going to drop that link into the chat for everyone if you want the compliments chart, and then we'll do questions. So let's see. Classroom management issues. I'm looking at the questions.
Oh,
A way to deal.
when you
I'm
paste
sorry.
when you paste in the chat, make sure that it's to everyone, not just the host and panelists. That way, everyone.
Got it. Got it. Got it. I'll do that in a second. I'm going to answer these two questions.
Right.
First, what do you suggest as a way to deal with classroom management issues? Yeah, that's tough. I've never had a classroom management issue in a virtual classroom. When my face-to-face school was wholly virtual, any kid who gave me trouble, I just booted him out of the room and wouldn't let him back in. I don't know if the facilitator is able to do that. And then I would email their parents and say, you know, this kid was acting up in class today. This is what he or she did. And I cannot, I can't have him in the class when he's doing that. That's what I did. But when I teach for NC Virtual, I only have one live meeting a week, and it's just for 1 hour. And so I really, the kids aren't required to come. So really the ones that are there are the ones that want to be there, and they're not going to be problematic. Alicia, I hope that answers your question. And let's see, Sabrina, how these could be applied to college age students? Okay, that's a good question, Sabrina. I still think if you're doing college virtually, one thing that's great would be you can ask the same kinds of interest questions, like, hey, I was just wondering what everybody's favorite food was, and they can reply in the chat. You don't call their parents. And these young adults are young adults. So you still have to hit them with what interests them. And I still think food, music, entertainment, inspiration is still a great way to make inroads. You can even just slide it into a conversation like, hey, last night I cooked such and such for the first time. Do any of you like to cook? Because in college, it's still about relationships. So I would try that. But yeah, the parents, you're not going to talk to parents. So Sabrina, I hope that helps. If I think of anything else, you know, maybe I can let you know. Yeah, that's a good question in the chat for you, Sabrina. I think I would give college students my number and let them text me. Oh, and that's the other thing. I let my kids text me 24 hours a day. I just don't take the phone in the bedroom with me. They know I'll answer them in the morning if I'm asleep. I'm going to get that link now for everyone.
Excellent. I noticed that one of our participants had used the raise hand function, but I didn't catch it in time. So I'm not sure who it was, but I would like to encourage that person to post the question as a Q&A or just post a message in the chat, and you can address it to everyone so that everyone can see it, or you can address it just to the host and panelists. Please feel free to use the chat actively.
There's the link to the pep talk generator if anyone wants that.
That's really nice. That's a great table. And I love the suggestion from a participant to experiment with making versions of that chart in the language of study.
Yes, I saw that.
Shara, this has been a wonderful presentation. And when I
thanks.
first heard about the topic of SEL and engagement, I knew you were the go-to person for that.
Oh, stop.
Well, those who are not our NC Virtual folks, Shara was my instructional leader, and she was my mentor during a time where I was going through a lot in my personal life and I needed a lot of support. And Shara really helped me to level up as a teacher, and she taught me why it's so important to engage with students and make those connections and not to be afraid to show your personality. I think sometimes, especially in the online world, we have to have a little bit of a persona of we're very prim and proper educators and we're always perfect and we always do everything right. But the more human I've been with my students, for example, even just tonight, I had a whole lot of technical issues because we've got a lot of weather here in Pittsburgh where I live and it's really icy outside. And so the internet doesn't want to cooperate. And by just showing that vulnerability and showing your students that you're human too, and things aren't always so rosy, they'll share things with you. They might say, you know, hey, Guten Sensei, I'm having a really tough time with this item that I'm working on at school, and sorry that my items are delayed for your class. Can I get back to you? Or I don't understand this. Can you please help me with it? So the vulnerability is huge, and everything that you've done to mentor me, I really do appreciate. I did want to address a question that I got about addressing behavioral issues in the online environment, because so I've been with NC Virtual for 10 years, and I have honestly, on one hand, I can count the number of times I've had behavioral issues where I've had to step in. And that's under the umbrella of the Arabic, the Japanese, the Mandarin, and the Russian kids. So the times that I really did have to step in, this was during the pandemic. And my hunch is that this was a 7th grader actually. He was just having a really tough time because he couldn't get to school. His life had been completely upended. And I don't think he normally would have behaved like this. But he was going into some of the classrooms. He would put in crazy names, like he was coming in as Joe Exotic on Zoom back when the Tiger King was really popular. And he would post things that we shouldn't be posting in chats anywhere, let alone at school. So luckily, our NC Virtual team was able to do some investigative work, and they found out that the IP address that he was joining the Zoom rooms from was that particular student. So I went to the school. They were very understanding and very kind, and they were going to handle the consequences on their end. But I reached out to the student and the parent, and I just asked what was going on. And while he did not admit to it, which I guess is understandable, especially if you're under that kind of pressure from a teacher coming at you and showing you that these things happened and I need some explanations. So while he didn't respond, that behavior stopped. And I noticed from hearing from that coach that the behavior seemed to get better and he seemed to be more of an active participant. So I think coming at it from a place of respect and just being very matter of fact that we really need students to engage with us in a positive way is a good way to deal with disciplinary issues. I'm very fortunate, like I said, that in the online world, I haven't dealt with it too much. But in the cases where we have, there's often a reason underlying as to why that's happening. And we just need to be a little bit sympathetic and understanding and just give the students another chance to do better next time.
You know, Sarah, one point I wanted to make, and it has to do with what you were just saying, is, you know, in my younger days, and Ellen can attest to this, I was very heavy-handed with kids. Where's your work? Why aren't you turning in your work? And she softened me up. And then I just realized that I got so much more, you know, the saying, you get more flies with honey than vinegar, right? But what I try to do now, especially after the pandemic, is when I text a kid, I never say, where's your work? I say, hey, what's going on? You know, is there something going on in your world that's keeping you from being able to do your work? And then I say, you know, sometimes the kids say, no, I'm just really lazy. You know, I just don't want to do it. I'm like, okay, well, that's all right. But what can I do to help get you motivated? You know, offer the help. And, you know, of course, keep parents informed if it's high school kids or middle school kids. But, you know, I want to start with what can I do for you instead of what's wrong with you? Where's your work? So, you know, just remember that too, that, you know, they say, you know, you see this on Facebook all the time. They say, you know, people are fighting battles that you know nothing about. And that's true. It's so true. And these kids are carrying such a burden nowadays, especially after the pandemic. I mean, they've got these backpacks full of emotions, and their brains aren't fully developed. They don't know how to deal with things sometimes. So, start with kindness every time, because it's not going to hurt anyone if you start with kindness.
It definitely doesn't hurt to start with kindness. And another takeaway that I took, and I know it's a small thing, but when you posted on one of your slides, just saying please and thank you, and coming from a place of appreciation whenever you're building a connection with students, has really helped me. And every time a student submits an assignment, even if it's only got a few things written on the paper, or even if it only has a few words, or they recorded one sentence maybe in a speaking assignment, I will always start with thank you for the submission. And so have you found that whenever you approach students, especially if you compare when you said you were a little more heavy-handed versus now that you say you've softened up a bit and you are more in the mode of appreciating the students, how have you found that they have changed when they're interacting with you and their coursework?
I think I get more out of them. They're more inclined to like redo things that they do poorly on, instead of kind of just forging ahead. They tell me more things, of course. They respond better. There are always kids I have where I text them and they just don't text me back, or I email them, they don't email me back. There's always those kids. But when I have those kids, I know it's not because of something I've done, because I've been nothing but kind and open to that. In the past, way back in the past, I've had kids just shut down because they just don't want to talk to me because of the way I talk to them. And as educators, we've all made mistakes, and I can own mine. There have been kids in the past that have shut down because of the way I approach them. And now I just don't do that anymore. I just approach them with kindness. And if they still don't want to talk to me, that's okay. So, but I think I get more out of them, and they're more willing to do what I ask because they like me, and they think that I care about them. It doesn't even matter if they like me. They think that I care. I think that's what it is.
Not think that they care, they know you care. They know because you're interacting with them. This has been wonderful, Shara. And if I could ask everyone who's here, if you could please take a moment to fill out the feedback form for Shara. We do like to hear feedback about how our panelists are presenting, and we want to hear from you in terms of what was helpful and what you'll be taking away from the presentation. So we do appreciate you taking a moment to fill out that feedback form. Shara, any final thoughts you want to leave our folks with?
No, I'm just so pleased so many people came and hopefully got something out of it. And I'm honored to have been asked by you to do it. And, Sarah said to me earlier today, we were texting, and she said, the stuff in your presentation is stuff that people can go do right now. Doesn't take any training. It's immediate. So just think about that and just do one thing different, and you'll see a difference. So anyway, thank you. I'm so excited to turn off my camera now, but everybody have a good night.